Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Jack, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to just start and build off of something Mr. Fallon noted. And Ms. Maher, I think you noted, and just to confirm within your statement to him, that NPR failed to accurately report the circumstances around and content within Hunter Biden's laptop story. Is that fair to categorize your statement?
Our current editorial leadership believes that we made a mistake not reporting the story and more reporting it earlier, yes.
And I recognize you weren't there at the time, but what institutes and control, what have you done to ensure that never happens again?
A number of things, sir, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to them. We have hired an additional editor core, which we refer to as our editorial review, to make sure that all stories before they go out are comprehensive and well-reviewed. We've instituted a monthly review to ensure that the most challenging stories of every month, we go back and we look at what we may have missed in order to not miss issues again and change processes and policies to be able to have more robust conversation and to ensure all areas and all views are considered. We have hired analysts to be able to count the number of stories that we're running on any particular issue, including whose voices are represented. We've moved from bringing pundits on air to trying to bring direct policymakers on air so that we can ask questions of policymakers rather than hearing through other people's perspectives. Those are just a few of the things we've done so far. I've got a couple others if you have time.
Thank you, and you can submit those for the record. Would you suggest then that the failure to accurately report those circumstances and the content around that story, would you suggest today, as I feel and many others feel, that impacted the 2020 election?
I could not say, sir. I don't know.
Well, I ask because you have a broad viewership, broad listenership, and I'm just curious if it is so broad and it is so necessary for us to continue to give taxpayer funds, as you all submit, to me, to misaccurately report something that's incredibly important around a 2020 election is very concerning. So welcome another thought from you there.
I believe that we made a mistake, as I said, and I believe that we have taken that to heart and are focused on how do we report and report effectively and in a timely fashion on all the issues that matter to all Americans. I hear your concern, sir, and I want you to know that we are truly working on this.
I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking about funding, and I know that some of my colleagues talked about it a little bit today, but could you walk us through the amount of money that NPR receives from CPB annually?
Yes, sure, sir. We receive $11.2 million this past year, the majority of which goes to the public radio satellite system, which we operate on behalf of the entire public radio network. We also received a smaller amount of funding in the course of the past year that went to help us hire those additional editors and analysts in order to be able to beef up that editorial review. We received funding to support the coverage of the recent election in order to make sure that we had our journalists all across the country and were able to speak to Americans of all different political backgrounds.
And what percentage of your budget share comes from the federal government?
Depending on how you count it, sir, it's less than 5%.
And to help me understand too, the CPB, as I understand it, Congress has appropriated $500 million to CPB. It flows out, and I think smaller radio stations go and apply for grants for it. Do you receive payment from smaller radio stations through licensing agreements and things of that nature?
We do, and the fees for that are designed around the amount of funding that they get from private member donations. So the fees are not designed around federal funding. They're designed around what sort of direct private support and donations they receive from members and listeners.
Well, I noted Mr. Jordan today suggested that you all are fundraising off this hearing today, and a question that I have then, if you receive less than 5%, and over today you've said that private funding helps support the mission and the work of NPR, could NPR survive without the 5% that we give NPR annually?
My belief is that the funding is essential to the public radio system, and that is the 246 member stations, but the 1,300 stations across the nation, so that we're able, as a network, to serve all Americans with 100% coverage. If federal funding for our network goes away, it means that people in rural parts of America, places where they can't afford to make private donations to support their local journalism, those will be harmed. But, sir, if I may, the bigger harm as well, or the additional harm, is that Americans in places that are affluent or do have many media choices will not be able to hear from their fellow Americans that are often underheard.
Bottom line, if the 5% went away, would NPR still exist?
Well, it would be incredibly damaging to the national public radio system.
I yield back.